All right, so we're talking XH2 today. This is kind of like my wish list or like a rumors list or whatever you want to call it. On all the kind of the things that I'm hoping to get in this camera. And we're just going to hope and pray that Fuji's listening so they can kind of give us the camera of our dreams. Who am I kidding? This camera's probably already designed and already laid out and probably already been manufactured. It's not like they're going to listen to a guy like me anyways. But we're still going to talk about it, so let's get into it. I just got my wisdom teeth pulled. Definitely don't recommend it. Unless, of course, it's necessary. And then, yeah, I don't know, it sucked. That's kind of why I've kind of been a little inconsistent the last couple of weeks, but we're getting better. We're getting back into it, so. What is up, guys? My name is Theo, and for those of you guys who don't know me, I do a lot of photo and video content here on this channel. I am also a Fujifilm shooter as well. I also throw in a couple of tech videos into the mix every now and then as well, so if any of that sounds appealing to you guys, definitely consider subscribing. It is much appreciated. All right, now, so getting into this wish list. So first category on this list, I'm going to talk about like the build of the camera. Some things that I want to see that are going to be, that I would hope to be different in this camera. And the first one is definitely the size. One of the things that I don't like about the XH1, oh, and real quick, this whole list is kind of coming from somebody who uses the XH1. That's the camera I'm currently filming on right now. This is kind of what I hope to see in this camera, and the camera that I want to upgrade to. So that's kind of where this is coming from. So the first one on this build list is the size of the camera. The XH1 is kind of a big camera. It's one of the only things I don't like about the camera. One of the things that really appealed to me on the Fuji system was just the size, like the small size of the cameras and the lenses. So for this camera being as big as it is, that's kind of the only downside that I don't like. So seeing Fuji put out a smaller camera with IBIS and everything in the super small form factor with the XS10, I'm kind of hoping they can bring down the size of the XH2. Now I imagine them keeping the grip and everything. I don't necessarily like the grip on the XH1. I know a lot of people love it and it does feel really good in the hands, but my hand tends to fatigue a lot quicker when I hold on to the XH1 after a long period of time, like say if I'm going out and shooting street photography or something. The first camera I ever bought into the system was the XT20, and I absolutely loved the size of this camera. Now I did put a little aftermarket like third-party grip on it that kind of gave me a little something to kind of clamp onto. This is kind of usually how I hold it, and like this kind of grip, I guess, is a lot more comfortable to me than actually holding on to the grip of the XH1. This just tends to get my hand to kind of cramp up like right along my fingers. So after a long period of time, I don't know, it's just me. But clamping onto the XT20 like that, I could literally shoot all day. I mean, it is what it is. I would imagine they're going to end up keeping the grip because the XS10 has it, so if they can make it a little bit smaller, a little bit easier for me to grab onto, I would appreciate that, but I know everyone else loves the grip, so it's probably not going to happen. Now, as far as the screen on this camera, I would imagine they're going to be putting the same flippy screen that they put on the XS10 and the XT4 into the XH2. There's a lot of controversy with that too. Like I know some people are still praying for the XT100 screen. I think that was just a random experiment that they happened to try. Either one I'd be happy with, but either way, it doesn't really matter to me. But I just want to be able to see myself when I'm making these videos and if I'm out vlogging with the camera. That's one of the main reasons why I want that flippy screen personally. So some people are kind of the complete opposite. Some people are more photography centered and they want that kind of just tilt screen, which I totally understand. But for me personally, I want more of like a video centric camera than a photography camera. So for me personally, that flippy screen definitely appeals to me in XH2. And now the last thing, as far as the build of the camera, Fuji is pretty known for the dials on their cameras, giving you that real like old school film camera like aesthetic / vibe. And I noticed they're starting to stray away from that. That personally doesn't bother me at all. Like I know on the XS10 they don't have any kind of exposure dials at all. Even with their new medium format camera that they just came out with, it doesn't have any of the exposure dials at all on that either. I'm 100% okay with that. I would prefer having a mode dial that has those like custom settings that you could save, hopefully video settings to those custom dials. They didn't really let you do that with the XS10, but that's something that I would love to see, especially for me with XH2. I want it to be a very video-centric camera, so that's something that I would definitely love to see. I would imagine they'll bring it over, but I know a lot of Fuji fans are real like die hard on like the old school Fuji with like aesthetic and the mode dials and the exposure dials and all that. So for me personally, I would love to see the custom setting modes as opposed to the exposure dials. So that's just my opinion. Now moving on to the next category for the XH2, and that's talking about the sensor that they're going to be putting in this camera. Now I know there are some rumors talking about like a 42 or 46 or 40 something megapixel sensor in this camera. I personally could care less about high megapixels, so that's not something that I need for what I do. Now I know there are some people some professionals out there that could definitely, use that resolution, but I only see the downsides to that, which for Fuji going up against the competition, or at least the full frame competition, generally higher megapixel count results in a lot more noise in your images. And that's something that I wish Fuji would improve on, is just higher, higher ISO. That's something definitely that I kind of have like an urge or like a desire to kind of invest into the full frame side competition. So I really wish, or I really hope that they can kind of improve on the higher ISO if they are going to bring those megapixels all the way up to the 40s or whatever it's going to be. One way I hope that they can kind of do that is like a dual native ISO. That'd be super sick. There's been like videos talking about the X-T4, that sensor, the X-Trans4 sensor in that camera. It has a dual native ISO when it jumps from 1600 to 2000. That's what it gets like ever so slightly cleaner. So if that technology is possible in these X-Trans sensors, then yeah, I would love to see them take advantage of that. And if they can choose, when the next native ISO is, bumping that up to it's a little bit higher than 2000, that would be amazing. I think that would kind of like fulfill the gap for those people who are craving those higher, cleaner ISOs. Definitely would for me, at least. So I really hope to see a dual native ISO, especially if they're going to be jumping up into the 40s for that megapixel count. That would be amazing. One of the other things that I hope to see, especially if they go to a higher megapixel count, is being able to crop into your image in camera. That's one of the things that kind of like pulls me or like seduces me to the full frame side of the competition, because I'm used to the crop sensor size, obviously. So to get into that full frame size and then being able to crop into your sensor to get a different like focal length, essentially, to me that just screams like usability and like being able to like the versatility, I guess, versatility, but being able to have like say a wide angle lens like on a full frame, like a 16 to 35, and you've been able to use that one lens to crop into APS-C mode, or like the Panasonic cameras let you crop even further that into like that 2x crop, kind of like that micro four thirds crop, and you can have one lens and basically have like this whole range of like a focal length from like a 16 to like all the way to like a 70 millimeter, like with just a 16 to 35 zoom. So something like that is just super useful, and something that I would love to see Fuji kind of implement into their cameras, from going from like an APS-C crop to like a 2x crop, kind of letting you get a little bit further reach. And if they have a higher megapixel sensor, they could definitely do that and still keep a pretty clean image and kind of oversample. And I don't know how all that works, but that'd be cool to see, and I really hope they do that, especially if they increase that sensor megapixel count. Now the next category, we're just going to kind of get into like the video specs and what I want to see in these cameras, or what I expect to see, I guess. Now the big one, obviously, that I think is going to separate the X-H2 from like the X-T4 is going to be like a super high resolution. So something like 6K or something like 8K. I can see them doing that for sure. It's kind of what all the kids are doing nowadays, I guess, and all these camera companies are putting into their cameras. And with 40 something odd megapixels, I think that they could technically do 8K. Fuji tends to like oversample with their images, so I can see them. What I would prefer is for them to go for a 6K image as opposed to that 8K, and they can kind of down sample from 8K to 6K. That'd be super sick. I think 6K and 8K are complete overkill, at least for what I do. It's definitely not needed, and I completely understand, and I can definitely see it has its usefulness. When you are shooting that 8K image, you can kind of crop in to have different kind of like camera angles and stuff. I totally get that, and like I would probably use it if I had it, but I don't have it, so I don't need it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I can totally see them doing something like that. That's going to be like the big thing. I think they kind of have to, because all the other camera companies are doing it, so it's their way of competing with them and kind of keeping themselves in the game, I guess you could say. Now as far as frame rates, I could totally see them doing like a 4K 120. That'd be super sick. I don't really shoot that high of a frame rate. Usually if I'm doing slow motion, I can keep it around 60. I think if I had it though, I would definitely use it. The 120 in the X-H1 isn't the best, so I kind of stay away from it. But I think if I definitely had a higher frame rate that was like super clean, I would totally use it a lot more. So 4K 120 is definitely welcome. And even in 1080, if they could bump it up from 240 to like 480, that'd be super crazy. I'm sure that would have its use cases as well. At the very least, I would just like them to improve the 240 that's in the X-T4. The 240 itself can get pretty slow, and I would just love to see that get as super clean as it is like the A7S III. I think that kind of goes like hand in hand though with like the 4K 120. I think the camera can shoot in 4K 120. It has the processing power to kind of clean up the 1080 240, if that's even how that works at all. But I think if the camera's going to have 4K 120, I would imagine the 1080 240 would be a lot better. So that's something I would love to see. Now the next category is kind of getting into like the photo specs side of the camera on what that could improve. I don't really know what else they could really improve as far as photo wise. The X-T4 is a killer stills camera, being able to shoot 15 frames mechanical. I guess they could bump that up technically to 20 frames mechanical. I think like one of the Canon cameras does that. I mean, the X-T4 or even the X-T3, I think was the first camera to really shoot 30 frames per second in stills. I think that was one of the first cameras to do that. So it already has those higher like frames per second. So I can't really see what else they could improve on, unless they're gonna get into like what the Sony A1 has, where they're like improving the processing power is like improving like the rolling shutter on the electric, and then they'll eventually get to that level. I don't think it'll be as good as the A1 like straight off the bat if they are improving that, but it'd be cool to kind of see them moving in that direction, because it's starting to seem, at least for Sony, it's starting to seem like a mechanical shutter is going to eventually be obsolete, which is kind of just crazy to say because that A1 has some pretty crazy tech inside of it. But yeah, if they're moving towards that, that'd be super sick. I definitely take it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, can't really see anything else. I guess you can consider the higher megapixel count to be an improvement to the photo side of the camera. For those people who definitely need those high resolution images, that would definitely be considered an upgrade to the photo side. So there is definitely that. As far as possibly a cleaner, higher ISO would be an improvement for photos as well. So that would benefit from it as well. So besides all of that, I would definitely hope for, obviously, like the obvious things to hope for in any new camera. Things like autofocus definitely improving. Definitely like to see Fuji put out like firmware updates for their lenses so that they can improve with autofocus. Like I know like the newer like f2 primes, like even I know the 35 f2 was one of the first f2s, but I'd love to see that camera improve its own autofocus, like because that sucker can stutter quite a bit when it's trying to focus. And I know it's not kind of quite a XH2 improvement, but the XH2 could improve from lenses getting their firmware updates. That's something I would love to see. But obviously, like I said, better like face tracking, better eye tracking, those type of things in both photo and video. Definitely better battery life, obviously. But I imagine that's going to improve because they're probably going to put the same battery that's in the X-T4 into the XH1, so that will be improved. Definitely improving record limits as my camera just stops recording. Record limit, if they can get rid of the record limit, that would be amazing. And obviously the last one, definitely no overheating, please. Fuji, if you could figure out something. Fuji cameras don't really have this issue from what I've heard. I know I've heard cases though that the X-T4 is like overheating, or it has overheated, or if you're shooting out on a hot day and stuff. I would imagine that they're going to have like some kind of improved heat sink or a cooling method for this camera, especially if they're going to be bringing in like the higher resolution 6K and 8K to this camera. So I would hope that they could learn from everyone else's mistakes to improve the cooling on the camera so that it doesn't overheat. Please, Fuji, definitely make that a priority for sure. But yeah, I mean, I really hope Fuji knocks this one out of the park, and they really kind of have to put everything they can and everything but the kitchen sink into this camera to really kind of compete with what's out there already, to really be able to compete with like the Sony cameras like the A7S III or even the A1, with that being their flagship camera. From what I've heard, the XH line is Fuji's flagship line, so to compete with others, or even Canon's R1 that's supposed to be coming out pretty soon. So I can imagine they want to compete with those cameras, which is why I think that they've kind of held off on the XH2 for so long, because they wanted this camera to be the first one with all the new sensor, the new processor, all these new features, which is great. And I really hope they nail it. I really hope they, just kill it with this camera, because I feel like there really wasn't a lot of Fuji hype this year. I know the X-T4 came out and it's a killer camera, but with it being kind of very similar to what the X-T3 was, I feel like the hype kind of just died off really quickly. There wasn't, when the X-T3 came out, that was a huge camera. Everyone was raving over it, and for good reason. But this year, I just feel like it kind of just died out quick. It didn't really have that same high high energy as the X-H2 did. So I really hope they knock this one out of the park to bring back that Fuji hype, compete with those other flagship cameras from Canon and Sony. But yeah, so that's kind of my wish list for the X-H2. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys are hoping to see in this camera. If you have any similar wish lists, similar items on your list that I do, definitely let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys think, or what you guys are hoping for in Fuji's flagship camera. So that about does it for me, guys. If you guys did enjoy this video and enjoyed this kind of camera talk with me, then definitely hit that like button. It is much appreciated. It definitely helps out the video. And I will see you guys in the next one. Later.